All right, so let's talk about MongoDB. Right, so NoSQL databases are alternative to relational databases, right? And it looks like a lot of what we think about databases in general, we always think of relational databases and SQL. But certainly, there's many other types of databases that are dealing with different aspects of data storage, right? Certainly, there's hierarchical databases, object databases, real-time databases. So there's certainly quite a bit of other things that we are storing and retrieving, right? And they deal with the specifics of a particular type of problem. Okay? For instance, real-time databases. Presumably we are tracking some data that is changing over time, and that's generating some real-time information, and we want to store this. Right? Do we want to store it forever? Is it useful to store it forever? We want to be able to query, and usually because these are data that is changing over time, usually our query is based on some range of time. Right? Do you want to query the data for the last minute, the last hour, last week, the last month? How do you want to aggregate the data? Right? How do you want to you want to see some kind of average, some trends, some tendency of how things are changing over time? These are completely different types of questions and problems that real-time databases deal with that relational databases don't deal with. Okay, and these databases are written specifically to be able to answer these kinds of questions. Yes, and so certainly you would not use a relational database for real-time data. Okay, you have different databases for different things. So non-relational databases are growing quite popular since they're trying to solve a problem that has been growing for the last decade or so, right? Where there has been this huge explosion of data that we are generating exponentially. That we're generating so much data that there's no way that we'll ever be able to process all that data in a lifetime. Okay, so we're looking for ways of dealing with this huge exponential growth of data, right? That we need algorithms to look at this and mine the data for us, to make any sense out of it, right? And the data seems to be very unstructured, right? Because we're trying to create relationships or find relationships where there might not be any relationships, right? I take out my phone and I wave it around, and I'm creating this data stream that somebody's storing somewhere, and is trying to relate that against some positional data and some time and weather and healthcare and the virus and whatnot, and do all sorts of predictions and try to mine this data, right? So these are completely different problems, right? That the relational databases were not meant to solve. So non-relational databases. Non-relational, meaning we're trying to deal with data that perhaps might not be related, right? Or records that at first we don't even know what the structure is, right? That we are going to try and identify the structure as we go along, right? And there might be some structure, but it might morph over time, right? It might change. I'd like to have a new field, right? Or change data type of some field, and it's elastic, has an elastic structure. There's quite a bit. I mean, it's a huge, brand new. Well, not so new. It's been around for quite a while, right? But just recently, from the last decade or so, they've become very, very prominent, right? In particular, because a lot of data, a lot of applications are making their way from the desktop or the centralized machines into servers, into things that exchange data in a particular format. Using the JSON format has become very, very popular, right? And it looks like JavaScript is it's like taking over the world. Everything now is formatted in JSON. Everything's formatted in this. It used to be XML. It used to be kind of the way to go in formatting data that you wanted to share across enterprises and whatnot. And because a lot of the movement has gone the web. It looks like JSON and JavaScript are taking over the world. There's plenty of all the types of non-relational databases, graph databases, real-time databases, but we're not going to take a look at those. All right, so first of all, we'll need to install Mongo. We're going to be using MongoDB as our non-relational database, NoSQL database. You can download it from MongoDB. There's a free version of this, called the community version. All right, you don't have to pay for this. So download it, install it. You'll need it for this assignment. When you install it, there'll be a couple of executables available, and wherever you put it in the bin directory of your installation, there'll be a whole bunch of executables in there. Right? In particular, we're going to be carrying about 2 executables in there. Right? The MongoD. MongoD is the equivalent of MySQLD. Right? It's the actual server. Right? You run that, and the server starts up and runs. Okay? The other executable is the Mongo client, right? Which is just called Mongo. This is the equivalent of MySQL, right? If you just run MySQL with the command, it starts up a interactive session that connects to a database, and then you can interact with the database at the console. Yes? So we'll play around with those 2 today. But before you can get the server up and running, the server is going to want to store their databases, right, somewhere. Right? And by default, it wants to create your file, all the database wants to store it inside of the root/data/db folder. Right? So if your server starts up and it can't find this folder, it'll complain. It'll say, oh, I don't know where to create my data store. And so you can override that and say, where else do you want me to store it? Right? You can say where, or you can go and create this folder. Now, depending on what your privileges are, if you're administrator or not on your machine, I assume you are, and you'll be able to create these folders from the root directory and create /data/db. I believe if you're on a Windows, you won't have any problems. If you're on a Mac, it depends what version of the OS you have. On the latest, I think Catalina doesn't allow you to create folders of the root, so you'll need to create it elsewhere. Okay, so one place you might try putting it is in your home directory, right? Squiggly line /. So under your home directory, you can create data/db. Okay. So sudo, I believe, will not work on the new Catalina, OS Catalina. Won't let you do that. All right. So once you've created the directory, you can say sudo MongoD, and that starts up your server. And then you can give it options of telling it where your folder is. If you were not able to create it from the root directory, you can tell it where, and you can run that. Notice that it'll look for the DB path, looking for that folder. If it doesn't find it, it'll complain. Okay, and then it'll it'll stop waiting for connections at that port. The default port where the server listens is at 27,017. Right, that's the equivalent of MySQL listening at 3306 or something. I forget. Okay. All right, then we'll use the Mongo client. All right, so let's try ourselves to start our Mongo. Let me close that. Maybe do I have Mongo running? Okay, I don't have Mongo running. So let's do sudo MongoD. Oh. Okay, it's complaining. It says that it cannot find /data/db. I believe we can tell it where to find the directory. Let me see if I already have a directory somewhere. I don't see one here. Oh, maybe I do. Data. So cd ls data. Okay, so I have /data/db. All right, so we should be able to start it and say that we want the DB path to be squiggly line data/db. Oops. No. Data? No. Well, maybe that's not the command line. Let me see. Just let me look it up for a second. DB path. Sudo MongoDB. Yeah, that's what I did. Oh, without the dash dash. Oh, it is with the dash dash. There we go. All right, it's up and running. All right, so notice that it's listening at 27.0.17. And then in a separate tab, we can start the Mongo client. All right, so let's talk about the Mongo client next.